Welcome everyone to Animal Instincts, how Labour can protect animals, enhance the environment and deliver meaningful growth, because we're all very much on message here today, which is obviously very important to everyone in the Labour Party to emphasise the growth element. But I just want to say it's great to be here. I'm from LAWS, that's the Labour Animal Welfare Society. We're affiliated to the party, one of the socialist societies, and it's nice to do this event with SERA, Labour's environmental campaign group. It's the first time we've done this together, so it's really great to cooperate, the two socialist societies, I think, and we greatly appreciate all the work that your staff at SERA and everyone has done to make this event possible. So yeah, just want to get that on record. Thank you very much. We've got a great panel here today. I'll introduce them shortly. I'll just explain who I am. I'm Richard, so I'm from the Labour Animal Welfare Society. I'm on the executive committee there. I've been volunteering at a conference with LAWS for 10 years now. So it's quite an experience. Before that, I worked for the Labour Party as a local organiser. I don't know if anyone's ever done that job, but it's very much an intense political education like no other. And so, yes, I'm from the part of the red wall that is the old Nottinghamshire coalfields. So that's an explanation of who I am. I now work for Respect for Animals, full-time campaigning against the fur industry. Yeah, I do that with the Fur Free Alliance and the Brussels-based Eurogroup for Animals as well. So that's just so in case you were wondering who the hell is that guy, that is who I am. LAWS has been a part of the Labour movement for a long time now, and it's been a very proud part of it because animal welfare has always been a part of Labour's tradition and history. And there was an awful lot of really historic, meaningful policies made reality by the last Labour government. And it's great because in our office, it's something of a museum to the history of the animal welfare campaign in the Labour Party. And I have a few props, including this Animal Welfare Manifesto from 1997, New Life for Animals, and it was packed full of policies, and it was even signed by the leader of the Labour Party at the time, Tony Blair MP, and it was fully backed by the leadership, and pretty much all of these policies, such as ban on fox hunting, a ban on fur farming, and so on, were actually enacted by the Labour government. So that just shows what is possible. I also have this, which is from the archive. It's LAWS Conference Post-Election Special magazine from October 1997, and it's very interesting. There's some articles from people like Bill Oddie in it, for example. There's also a leader. The very first page is by Elliot Morley, who was in DEFRA, what is now DEFRA, and the main minister responsible for pushing forward animal welfare issues. And he has a double page spread on what Labour has done in its first 100 days for animals. And there's 11 detailed bullet points on that. Now, we're a little bit beyond our first 100 days now in this government, but what we did get is a really bold pledge from Steve Reed at the time for the biggest boost in animal welfare in a generation. And that's what we're doing, LAWS, at this conference, is really trying to say, let's get on with it, let's start making those meaningful policies that can really make history for animal welfare. That's what we're really pushing for. And there's a lot of really detailed expertise on this panel which can go through this and explain how we can do it. Now, we're all very politically aware of the situation. So one of the things that we push in LAWS is animal welfare policies that aren't going to cost too much money, if anything at all. So the Treasury should not object. And we're also trying to promote it in the context of growth and good for the environment, because a lot of these are just popular policies that can bring a lot of good news to Labour. And I think we could do with a bit more of that right now. So that's kind of the situation where we are. Obviously, the animal welfare strategy is due out by the end of the year. So there's been a lot of work going on that. And we're looking forward to seeing what exactly will be in that. But obviously, we've had a pre-conference reshuffle, which has slightly complicated the situation. So Steve Reed's no longer in office, in DEFRA. He's moved to housing. And now we have Emma Reynolds, and Angela Eagle has become the farming minister. So it's an interesting time. There's a lot of work to do done. And I'm looking forward to hearing from our panel right now what will happen is each speaker will talk for 3 to 5 minutes. We'll have a little bit of discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience as well. So I'll introduce our panel. I'll just go through them right now. To my left, all the way from Cannock Chase, we have Josh Newbury MP, and I have a biography of him. He's a Labour Member of Parliament for Cannock Chase, a member of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee, and he takes a strong interest in farmed animal welfare, including issues around cage use and food labelling. And I just want to say, because I know you've done a lot of work with laws, it's an absolute perfect example of a new intake. He's very active. He's not just good in his constituency, but he does things, speaks up in Parliament. He asks questions all of the time, and it's great to have you speaking here, and that's an asset. Next to him is Tashi Thomas from Animal Policy International. And Tashi has a lot of experience working as a researcher for a front bench MP within the UK Parliament. Before working in Parliament, Tashi worked in public affairs and campaigns, where her work contributed to pivotal shifts in public policy and legislative reform. Now, Animal Policy International particularly focuses on international trade. Now, that might not be the sexiest of topics, but actually it is very interesting, and what those of us in the animal welfare movement have had to do over the last year or so with the government's priority towards an EU reset is take a deep dive into animal trade issues. And Tashi has a really deep knowledge of that, and she explains it in easy to understand ways. So it's great to have her on the panel. I'm very grateful for that. And we also have Wales' finest, Ruth Jones MP, who was first elected for Newport West in a by-election in 2019 and has been re-elected twice and now represents the Newport West and Isthwyn.
Good enough.
Good enough, thank you. That's the thing I was most worried about. In opposition, Ruth held 2 roles at the Shadow Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, including a remit for flooding, the natural environment and air quality, and animal welfare as well. And she's currently the chair of the Welsh Affairs Committee in Parliament, quite right too, and she's stood up tirelessly for animal rights in Parliament. She's a real ally, and whether it's supporting efforts to disrupt puppy smuggling or getting the data right on dangerous dogs. Most importantly of all, she currently has a private member's bill in Parliament awaiting a second reading, which would ban the import of fur and help stop the killing of animals for fashion. Now, I did say at the start that I work on fur, so I'm very biased at bigging up Ruth's work on this because it's a huge campaign. And I know that there's a lot of people who are big fans of Ruth, so it's a bit of a Ruth Jones fan club gathering, dare I say. And finally, I don't have a biography for Will Morton from the League Against Cruel Sport, so I'm just going to make it up. Will's, I don't know how long you've worked for the League, but you've been there for a very long time.
I think 8.5 years.
So, 8.5 years.
Head of Public Affairs at the League Against Cruel Sports, covering England and Wales.
Perfect.
Obviously, in terms of Wales, been quite heavily involved in some of the positive animal welfare developments there, in terms of the recent snaring ban and some of the focus on issues, for example, shooting, where the Welsh government's been very forward-leaning. We're hoping to get a bit of that over here in England too.
Brilliant. And he never ages, Will Morton. He's always, it's always the same. So we'll start, and I think we'll crack on and hear from our speakers to begin with. I think we'll go in the order. We'll go from Josh, then we'll go to Ruth, then we'll go to Tashi, then we'll go to Will. So, Josh, if you'd like to take it away.
Okay. Well, thanks, Richard, for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to speak on the panel. Really honoured to be taking part. As Richard said, I'm the MP for Cannock Chase, sit on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee. I've always been passionate about animal welfare, but as a new MP coming in, I think you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, particularly with people like Ruth who've been championing this for so long. But actually, when you get into the debates and you start to find your feet, you realise the things that you're really passionate about and want to be an advocate for in Parliament, and this has absolutely become one of those things for me, so I'm really grateful to be taking part. I think we've always prided ourselves as being a nation of animal lovers, but if we're really being honest with ourselves, that hasn't really extended to farmed animals as much as it could or as much as it should. It's estimated that still in the UK we have 10 million animals in cages on farms. The vast majority of them, around 8 million, are hens in so-called enriched cages, and I think whichever marketing team came up with that term really earned their salt that day because they're not really enriched in any sense, but they sound great. 200,000 mother pigs still in farrowing crates, as we know, and they don't even have enough space to turn around. There's some debate over whether they're better for the welfare of piglets, but it's clear that they prevent natural behaviours and cause immense emotional distress. And we've also got calves, quails, game birds, many other animals in cages as well. But we've seen with the gradual but determined away from caged hen eggs that the public are very much on board with supporting animal welfare. We've got to the point where all major supermarkets have committed to taking caged hen eggs off their shelves by the end of this year, and some, like Tesco, have also included ingredients in that too, which is really positive. But there's still a hidden demand for caged hen eggs, for example, in restaurants, and the biggest buyers are still prisons, schools, and hospitals. So it's really important that Labour's flagship pledge to source 50% of food from British farms also boosts welfare, because we need to set a good example, not, as we do at the moment, a bad example. But most of the public have never heard of things like farrowing crates, but we know that when it's explained to them in a neutral way, 3/4 want to see their use ended for good, and at least 2/3 are happy to pay 6p more on their weekly shop, for example, for completely cage-free eggs. And that cuts across all different regions, cuts across different income levels and political views as well. And I think we all know in the current climate it's really rare to have something that unites everybody with different political perspectives, so we should be seizing on that as a government. And there's a real lack of public awareness as well, with things like the lack of welfare standards for fish and crustaceans, and also the fact that 90% of pigs, for example, in abattoirs are still stunned using carbon dioxide, which is terrible from a welfare perspective. And 20 years ago, the government's own independent animal welfare committee recommended that be phased out within 5 years. But clearly that's not happened, and actually the number of pigs being stunned in that way has doubled in that time. And there are so many examples in other countries of strong progress, whether it's on banning cages, which the EU is committed to doing, raising standards, or improving information for consumers. It can be done, and as always, if there's a will, there's a way. So in my view, what do we need? I think 3 things. Firstly, we need the animal welfare strategy to set a clear commitment to ending cages with a timeline attached, so that we can drive real action throughout the supply chain. This has got to be from farmers all the way through to retailers, and that's got to be done in partnership. But I think we've also got to be mindful of the law of unintended consequences here, because in 1999, for example, the last Labour government banned sow crates where pregnant pigs are confined, which was really groundbreaking, but it was, I think it could be argued, brought in a little bit too quickly. So many pig farms shut down, and we imported far more, but mostly from countries where sow stall use was widespread. So we didn't get any discernible benefit on welfare, but we had negative impacts on the economy and for the environment as well. And secondly, we've got to do this in partnership with farmers. Contrary to what you might expect, many farmers, the vast majority, want to move to cage-free systems. They see it as the next step in modernising their industry. And 40% of pigs are already reared in cage-free systems, but for the remaining 60%, many of them don't have the resources to be converting themselves. So we need long-term partnerships with retailers and possibly subsidy from government as well. And finally, thirdly, we need transparency and consistency across the board, so it's a true level playing field. My view is that welfare labelling will be absolutely essential for this. We have to empower consumers with information that they need to make informed choices. Despite free-ranged and caged hen eggs being really small print on boxes, we know that consumers know what that means and are overwhelmingly rejecting low welfare products. So we need to make that even clearer and roll it out sector by sector across all animal products. I could talk for hours on labelling, and I have done in the House of Commons lots, but I know that's probably going to be coming up during questions, so for now I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Josh. Ruth?
Oh, there we are. Shall I?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, can you? I'll just bring that across just in case. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to see so many old friends, obviously mature people, not old at all, and the sun is shining, so bear with me if I'm peering through the mist here, but yeah, it's great. Thanks very much to Sarah and to Laws for hosting this. It's great to have the combined ops together, and I did check, yes, I am still a member of both, so that's okay, but and I'm very, very proud to be a patron of Laws, which is an organisation which has been going since 1992, obviously with Sarah as well, but it's really, really honouring to be a patron there. So, Josh, I wouldn't worry about imposter syndrome, because I still feel like an imposter. So there's always somebody bigger and better further on down the line. So just take it for what it is, I think. Yeah, so my name's Ruth Jones. I'm Member of Parliament for Newport West and Listroyne. Very good pronunciation. And yeah, it's been interesting because I've only been here 6 years, but there's been quite a lot going on apart from a pandemic and, you know, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. We've had a lot of churn. So it would be really nice to actually get some real proper stuff going on animal welfare, because I did look after animal welfare as a shadow minister So I do know a little bit, but not as much as the experts on this panel, obviously. But I just think it's really important that we understand we are a nation of animal lovers. You know, yes, farming, you're right, farming is important and often overlooked. But, you know, every MP will tell you our mailbox is full of people writing to us to say, do something about this, stop this is cruel, don't do it. So it is a really big issue for all MPs, and I have to pay tribute to the organisations out there who can actually mobilise their supporters. If we have a debate in Westminster Hall, for instance, I know I'll get MPs turning up to that debate saying, I had to come, I had 150 emails, you know, and they want to prove that they're animal lovers. So it works for us, but in a way, you know, I always say we have to speak up for the animals because they can't speak for themselves. And that holds true across the board. So it's really, really important we're here to represent and make sure the animals that we can look after, we look after them properly. So, as Richard said, my private member's bill is all about banning fur and fur imports to the UK. Now, the UK banned fur farming on our soil over 20 years ago. No brainer. But we are still importing it from places across the world, from Greece, from all over Europe, you know, all sorts of places you wouldn't expect. And if you've seen the videos of the conditions that these animals are kept in, is, you know, we talked about cages earlier, but I mean cages that they literally can't turn around in. They are kept in appalling conditions. Their lives are miserable. There's no way they can behave like animals. And their deaths are frankly horrific too. If you've seen how they're killed to protect the pelt, is absolutely awful. So I think, you know, most people, when you put it out that, oh, we want to ban fur, haven't we done that already? No, we haven't. We need to do it. Well, of course we do. Get on with it. And that's the usual frequent thing from my constituency. Get on with it. So, yeah. In terms of why we should ban it, I mean, it's obvious, I would say, it's why we need to ban it. But, I mean, the animal cruelty is one thing. The environmental issues as well, because the animal waste from these fur farms that go into the local rivers and streams and whatever are polluting. The chemicals that are used to treat the pelts also get into the environment. They're noxious fumes and things like that, so that's not great. And in terms of carbon footprint, they're actually, the carbon footprint for real fur farming is bigger than the production of faux fur. So lots of people have written to me, say, oh, well, you know, faux fur it's very difficult with all the chemicals and stuff. No, actually, the carbon footprint for that is smaller. So we should, there's a number of reasons why, but I think one of the most important is the problems in terms of the viruses that are found on on fur farms. So I think it was a report last year found there was something like 39 new viruses, of which 13 could be transmitted to humans. Now, that's shocking in itself. You know, these fur farms, literally, these animals are cheek by jowl. The people looking after them, this was found in China. Now, you know, we know how the last pandemic started, and the report concluded horrifically, basically, there's another pandemic just waiting around the corner because of fur farming. So for nothing else, we should be doing for the human reasons, is we need to protect this planet. So that's really important. We're also told at the moment that Josh has mentioned the EU UK reset, and obviously Tashi knows far more about this than I do. Oh, you can't do it yet. You can't do it yet because of we have in the middle of talks at the moment, so resetting our relationship with the EU. No, we can do it alongside. We don't have to wait 18 months. We can get on with it, because the main thing is our animal welfare rights, our protections in the UK they have been really, really good. You know, trade deals with the US, we didn't want chlorinated chicken or the beef, hormone injected beef. We did all we could to prevent the Australian sheep coming in. Jury's out on that one. But we need to make sure that we can actually protect animal welfare on our soil and make sure that it's not downgraded because we've got to fit in with other people. So animal welfare is not just about DEFRA. It's about the Cabinet Office, because Nick Thomas-Symonds is looking to set the EU-UK reset. It's about the Home Office. If we want to talk about animal testing, the Home Office is in charge there. It's about housing. Renters, should be allowed to have pets in their home. All of these things. Animal welfare crosses all divides, if you like. So I think that's one of the problems, is sometimes it slips through the cracks. and that's an issue in itself. So, but in terms of, obviously that's my private member's bill, and I'm passionate to get that through. There are difficulties, there are technical difficulties, but we are not giving up on this. It is delayed, it is not stopped. It is delayed for the time being, but we will get it there. I promise you that. But there's so much more than fur that we could talk about, and I don't want to take Will's thunder, because the Hunting Act is another easy one. Tighten the loopholes on that. Come on, you can tell us all how to do that, Will. Ban foie gras. Lots of these things, we need the animal welfare strategy that we can have, if you like, as a Christmas tree, which we then hang these other legislative pieces or frameworks on top. So we actually have a coherent piece of work, rather than, we'll have a piece over here. We did glue traps in the last Parliament. Glue traps over here. We might talk about snake. It's all bitty. Bring it together, and then we get everything, the best deal we possibly can for animals across the UK and the world. Dangerous dogs is another one. It's really, really important that we actually understand what we're talking about here. Just come from another meeting where we were talking about dangerous dogs, and it's not just the tragic cases of children or older people who've been killed by dogs. There are other dogs. There's dog-on-dog attacks. Now, if you go to a police force and you ask them for their stats on it, I think there's something like 39 police forces, you'll get 39 different answers, because they give you what they collect. And it's not uniform. So across the UK, you've got no clear way of understanding a dangerous dog. We know dangerous dogs attacks are on the rise, but we don't know by how much. And again, that's important to know. Things like the low quality overseas animal activity. When you go to an elephant show, when you're overseas somewhere, nobody knows the cruelty that elephant has been subjected to break their spirit so that they will perform. There've been accidents, elephants have literally gone mad and trampled people. There've been deaths. This is a simple thing that can be legislated against. We could publicise this. We could get the travel agents to say, don't put it as part of your brochure, attracting people to go to see these things. Stop it there, and then we'll stop the activities. Concentrate on other better activities. It's a simple thing. Let's not even go on to hunting trophy imports, because that'll take all day. There have been several attempts to get it done, but we need to get that nailed and through as well. There's so much more to do. There is an awful lot to do. There's been a start, and Labour, as people will, I'm sure, say, we've been in now for 14, 18 months. There's an awful lot more to do. The plans are being made, but I can speak as a non-frontbencher. I'm a backbencher, so like Josh, I'm pushing the Minister all the time to say, come on, what are we doing? I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and things like that, because I think it's really important. We need to take the grassroots with us on this, because we're not talking in ivory towers here. We're talking about real things. Animals matter, cruelty matters, and we need to put a stop to it. I'll finish there.
Brilliant, thank you, Ruth. It's a really good point you make about cross-government situation involving animal welfare. That's something that we come across a lot and try to deal with as best as we can. And that's something that I think the party as a whole, a strategy, can really make a difference for. Tashi, I will hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's great to be on a panel with such amazing animal advocates. I'll just build a little bit on what Ruth said around imports and making sure that we apply our animal welfare standards across the market to all products. As Richard mentioned, Animal Policy International works exclusively on trade. Yes, a little bit of an unsexy topic, but I think very important. We've chosen to focus on that because we think on our animal welfare laws, there's a hidden loophole that is undermining the decades of progress that we've already built upon in our laws. The UK does have some of the world's most progressive animal welfare laws, but we're undermining them by allowing the importation of animal products that produce from systems that we've banned on our supermarket shelves. Ruth's already mentioned fur farming, but we've also made progress in a lot of different ways on farmed animal welfare particularly. We've banned battery cages for laying hens. We've banned sow stalls, as Josh mentioned, for mother pigs, and we've banned foie gras, where ducks are force-fed until their livers grow 10 times their size. Yet we import, I think, like 32 tons of foie gras annually. Just to put that into perspective, that's around 53,000 birds from France and from Hungary across the board, from a practice that we banned years ago. This ultimately, misleads consumers, the British public, who have voted for real change, and they want to see this change reflected in their supermarket shelves. And it also puts our farmers at a severe disadvantage because they are forced to compete with low welfare imports and cheaper imports. But most of all, it causes the suffering of animals overseas and abroad for British consumption. As has been mentioned many times in the panel, we know that Britain is a nation of animal lovers, and British people ultimately don't want to outsource cruelty. We want to see an end to cruelty entirely. API has just done some polling recently, just fresh out last week with Bryant Research, and there's huge public consensus around this. Around 89% of people want to see a ban to cruel imports. In fact, the polling shows that more Brits agree on banning cruel imports than agree on whether they like Christmas or pizza. So it's very much a win-win policy. It unites animal advocates and unites farming groups. But I just want to touch on an issue that makes this particularly timely, and it's been mentioned, the EU-UK Reset SPS agreement. The government is currently negotiating an agreement with the EU. It's called phytosanitary standards, and it's going to reduce trade barriers between the EU and UK on agri-food. But effectively, what animal welfare groups are really worried about is that this could lock us in on being able to act on imports as an issue. Currently, we can legally ban cruel imports if we choose to do so. But this new deal would require us to accept any animal products coming in from the EU, even if they are made from practices that we've banned in the UK. So once we've signed this deal, if we don't get any exemptions, we would lose our legal right to ban foie gras imports, flour imports. And this doesn't just affect EU imports. If, for example, Brazilian beef produced from deforested rainforest enters the EU market under this new deal, the EU-Mercosur deal that the EU is signing, we won't be able to restrict that either. Unfortunately, the Labour government is not prioritising animal welfare in these negotiations, and without proper protections, we really struggle, and we'd lose our sovereign right to be able to apply British values across the British market. But I do want to end that I think there is hope. Switzerland has negotiated a very similar deal, the Common Food Safety Area, and they faced exactly this choice, but they prioritised animal welfare, and they were able to get exemptions within this deal, and they kept their right to ban cruel imports. So they were able to ban things like fur and also have animal welfare labelling and apply that across to imports. And this has allowed them to now bring a ban to partially ban fur imports. Our government can do the same if they prioritise animal welfare in these negotiations, as Switzerland has done, and protect our standards. So I just want to end on the fact that we really do need to address this issue of imports and make it fair across the board, level the playing field. We need to make it fair for animals who suffer in cruel systems overseas, fair for people who just want to ensure that their shopping choices match their values and the laws that they voted for, and also fair for our farmers who have invested in higher standards.
Thank you, Tashi. Yeah, it's a really important point, and I can't emphasize enough just how important this trade stuff could be, because we could find ourselves locked out of making popular animal welfare policies that could really make a difference, unless it's on the agenda and the government realises, because they're negotiating this right now. So anyone who has any influence, write to your MPs, get your MPs to write to ministers and raise awareness about this, because it's a really important topical point. Okay, we'll come to our final speaker. It's Will Morton from the League Against Cruel Sports. Take it away, Will.
Thank you. So, I mean, we've heard from everybody really how important animal welfare is to the general public, what a vote winner it can be, and what a no-brainer strong animal welfare policies are for the party and for government. I'd just like to also make the point that it's kind of a matter of public trust, given that the manifesto was quite slim on specific animal welfare commitments. It's very important that those pledges that were made in the manifesto are delivered in this term and in a timely fashion. I think it would be damaging to public trust, particularly those who voted for the Labour Party on the strength of its record on animal welfare, if we were to see further slippage of some of those key pledges that have been made. And I say that partly because I know we're not that far into the life of this current government, but time is starting to get tight in terms of some of the detailed work and potentially the challenges of the sort of passage of some of this legislation through Parliament. Some of these things, as we've seen in recent years and under the previous government, can take a long time with the best will in the world. So we do need to get on with them. And two of those issues are pledges which are very important to the animals that the League Against Cruel Sport seeks to protect, and one of those is hunting with dogs. I'm sure most of you in the room will know, but if you didn't, despite hunting with dogs being banned almost 20 years ago, it's still happening day in, day out, as if it was never banned. It's extraordinarily easy for hunts to get around the law, evade prosecution. We've seen some really positive progress in terms of a pledge to hold a consultation on the issue later this year, but we're starting to hear murmurings of whether it will slip. So it's important that that is launched this year as promised, and that it is in a broader scope as possible. This is kind of unfinished business for the Labour government, something that most of the public thought should have been delivered 20 years ago. It's still going on. This is kind of our moment to get it right. And for that reason, we need to make sure we're not narrowly focusing purely on trail hunting, which is the primary pledge in the manifesto around hunting, but that it deals with all of the various weaknesses of the legislation which enable, for example, the hunting of deer with dogs, all sorts of ruses, excuses to evade the law, and some of the important but boring technical detail around how long police have available to charge suspects, etc. So it needs to be broad in scope. And if we get it right, we've got the opportunity for a really positive impact on animals and communities, because it's not just animals that feel kind of the brunt of this wildlife crime. It's people whose pets have been chased and killed by packs of dogs, people whose land's been trespassed upon, farmers who suffer livestock worrying as a result of the chaos that's happening in the countryside. Quickly, in terms of the economics, not only should it be essentially free, it's not going to be a costly policy, there's a potential for it to have a positive impact on, for example, police budgets. A lot of the enforcement that does go on in the countryside at the moment is resource-intensive public order policing, dealing with battles between various sides of the issues. If we end up with a strong, effective, enforceable law, it's something that the police will be able to cleanly enforce where there is law breaking, and should help to some degree ease a little bit of pressure on rural policing budgets. The second issue, again, which really positively the government have pledged to address, is the use of snares, which, again, if you don't know, they're quite a primitive form of trap which are used to catch animals so they can then be killed. They're primarily used to sustain really intensive game bird shooting practices, wiping out huge swathes of native predators so that the tens of millions of non-native game birds that are released into the countryside annually can be shot for sport. It's something we've seen a really successful ban on in Wales and in Scotland, so it should be straightforward to do in England. We just need to make sure that that pledge is delivered. So I'm hoping that we'll see some good news as part of the animal welfare strategy. I don't know if Ruth has any insights into what we might expect. And again, that is something which is essentially cost neutral. In the Welsh Government's analysis, as it was progressing with the ban, they identified zero costs for land managers, zero costs for enforcement. The only cost they identified was in the order of £300 for some promotion to the sector of the fact that snares have been banned. So again, it should be an easy, popular win, something which goes down well in rural areas. Our polling shows that 80% of people in rural areas support a ban on snares, and again, isn't going to cost money, which is obviously a concern for any government. I will leave it there to leave some time for questions. I could say more.
Brilliant, Will. Thank you so much. A really good point, again, to just emphasise, hammer home, these are popular policies that don't cost money. And I think this is a real strong point for us. We're just going to repeat non-stop and make sure that the party pays attention to us. He's absolutely right, Will, is that time is flying and we want to leave some time for questions. I've just got a few follow-ups that we can very briefly maybe cover, and then I'll open it up to the floor. In particular, one of the things that I think is really important is at these meetings that we don't just speak in terms of vague ideas and sentiments. We actually talk about practical policies that can make a difference. And I think we've heard exactly from this panel exactly how we can do that. Josh, if I could just come to you about particular food labelling schemes, because I know that's something that's dear to your heart and you've done a lot of work on. I think there's a better animal welfare labelling scheme introduced in Denmark, for example, and one been successful in Germany. What thoughts do you have about how that could work here?
Yeah, I've become a real nerd about this topic. You know how we all just end up with our hobby horses, and it's one that I'm definitely not getting off of. And it got to the point where we had quite a succession of animal welfare debates in Parliament, and when the former Minister Daniel Zeichner would walk in, he would say, "Oh, hello, Josh, you here to raise labelling?" Yes, Daniel, I am. So yeah, in Germany and Denmark, two countries that have got really successful widespread used labelling schemes to raise consumer awareness. So kind of in a similar way to we've had the EU's energy labelling scheme that I'm sure you're all familiar with when you buy your white goods. In Germany, they've got a colour-coded A to F scheme. And it's all really about having a level playing field and also about raising standards. And the interesting thing about the German scheme, which we were able to learn as an EFRA committee when we had a recent trip over there, is that it is done actually without the government's involvement at the moment. It's very much industry-led. And they have every year or so sort of renegotiation around what the standards are. And that involves representatives from farming groups, distributors, and retailers themselves as well, all the major retailers in Germany. So everybody kind of buys into it. Nobody's disadvantaged by it, hopefully. And it's something that therefore is seen as really positive. Nobody sees it as a threat. It's something that they very much buy into. And, you know, the consumer awareness and feedback on it is really, really strong. And I think, as with energy labelling, you can use it to set standards. So governments have said, you know, you can't sell a G-rated washing machine, for example. Well, you could do the same thing with welfare if we had a scheme in place. For example, Denmark have banned the bottom two categories of their scheme in relation to chickens, which effectively means that they're going to phase out fast-growing breeds altogether, which again is something that not many consumers are aware of, but is terrible from a welfare perspective and is really spreading across the industry at the moment. And it's also about making sure that farmers are properly recognised and rewarded for producing high quality, high welfare products. We know that that is something that we're really strong on in the UK, but often farmers are under immense pressure from retailers on price. They're asked for more, but they're not really given any more resource to do that. And when you're talking about, for example, converting your farm to a cage-free system, which often involves building new barns, investing millions often in new systems, you can't really do that unless you've got the backing of a retailer. So we definitely need our retailers to step up on that as well. But it's also, for me, it has to be something accessible that consumers can easily recognise and interpret, which is going to be tricky because there's calls for better country of origin labelling, because that's often not accurate what you actually read on the packet, and also information on carbon footprint as well. So we risk, and this is one thing that Daniel would always say, we risk crowding packaging with too much information, overwhelming consumers and turning them off. But at the moment, we've got a patchwork of existing schemes like Red Tractor, RSPCA Assured, and although they are pushing high standards, unfortunately, both score really low on consumer recognition. With organic standards that are, again, much higher on animal welfare, most people aren't even aware of that. So we've got a cluttered landscape at the moment, and it's not really cutting through to consumers. It's not raising the bar on welfare as much as we'd like it to. So the government absolutely, I think, has to step into this space and come up with something like that we've seen in Europe, which could be very successful and actually eliminate a lot of the issues we've got with the system at the moment.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And of course, yeah, DEFRA's own impact assessment found that there's a net benefit to society of approximately 140 million. So I just want to emphasise that again. Pro-growth, good for the economy. So if there's anyone from the Treasury listening, please take that on board. We are getting through, so I'm just going to try and open it up as soon as possible. But Tashi, on international trade, the global situation is volatile. I'll put it that way on international trade. at the moment. What is very briefly, your assessment of the global trade environment? Is it a threat to animal welfare? Or
I guess the short answer is yes. Yeah, the trade landscape is very fragile right now, as you can see, with the tariffs and fraught with uncertainty. But it was actually really good, and a good commendament to the government that the recent trade strategy that they released committed to ensuring that they would protect sensitive sectors from being undercut by low welfare imports. So they talked about battery cages and sow stalls and making sure to protect farmers from that. But it is also then therefore unfortunate that we are currently negotiating that EU deal that I talked about that would open the door to more pork from systems that we've banned here coming to the UK and prevent us from applying restrictions to imports. Just to put it into perspective, a few weeks ago there was reports from Vietnam that they were building multi-story skyscrapers for pig farming and trying to increase their export market to reach more countries. So unfortunately, the trend outside of Western countries has been downwards when it comes to animal protection laws for farmed animals. Yet that is also animal farming continues to grow at a rapid rate. So we need to really ensure that we don't just displace our production, and it's vitally important that when it comes to those negotiations with the EU that we protect our rights to be able to apply restrictions so we can make a tangible difference not only to animals domestically but also to animals abroad.
Perfect. Thank you, Tashi. I believe, open it up to the audience now. If anyone has any particular questions to do with fur or to do with the League Against Cruel Sports areas of expertise on hunting and shooting and snares and things like that, then please do encourage you. Should we go from the row there? Go on.
Maybe Will and Tashi may know a little bit more about this and Ruth. There's one thing that I would like to happen in terms of enforcement about hunting animals is that I would like the police to have more powers of intervention because I don't know how the hunt saboteurs, whether you like them or not, they're probably stopping hunting and they're doing it for the welfare of animals, which I totally agree with really. Is since certain hunting has been banned, have we had anything done? Has there been more people
prosecuted
in terms of banning certain
and hunting? And can we get more bans on the hunting of animals
in England?
Yeah, go on.
I mean, in terms of sort of hunting with dogs, so fox hunting, etc., prosecutions of what we would all understand to be traditional hunting, mounted hunts, chasing after foxes and other animals with packs of dogs. There are a small number of prosecutions, but they're very limited given the scale of the issue. I mean, there are still almost 200 essentially fox hunts operating in England and Wales. And yet, I think there have only been 24 prosecutions related to registered hunts in the entirety of the life of the Hunting Act. And really, in England and Wales, that's mostly because of the way the law was written and interpreted by the courts. Unfortunately, you have to prove that the hunting was intentional. You can get somebody essentially bang to rights on video what the public would understand to be clearly illegally hunting. They're chasing a fox with dogs. But unless you can prove from what's demonstrated in the video that the huntsman was intending to do it deliberately, chasing it rather than essentially manufacturing an accident, it's extremely difficult to get a prosecution. Which then there's a huge gap then in terms of public perceptions of what the law should enable and provide for, and what, even with the best will in the world, the police are able to do. And in terms of what needs to change, one of those things needs to be banning explicitly, hopefully, the practice of trail hunting, which is essentially just a ruse to disguise illegal hunting, but also to address that question of intention. So essentially to make sure that reckless and supposedly accidental behaviour is also captured by the law, so that basically you can't hide behind doing something which is obviously so dangerous and so likely to result in an animal being chased and then just say, well, it was too late. I didn't know that was going to happen. It wasn't my fault. Will make a huge difference. And by making the law hopefully clearer, more robust, removing all of the explicit exemptions, which, I mean, frankly, they're ludicrous. They're allowances for people to conduct scientific research by hunting with dogs. I mean, there's nobody legitimately conducting scientific research in that way. Should then make it easier and clearer for the police to enforce. That I imagine still be a role for volunteers, SABs, monitors in the countryside, but the behaviour that they capture evidence of should then be more easily prosecutable, is the ambition. Does that? Yeah.
And I should just add that obviously we know hunt saboteurs, that SABs have been taken to court. You know, it's like, excuse me, what? So, you know, that's one of the other issues. And we know that underground criminality, so badger baiting, things like that, is on the rise, because even the police forces, you know, small amounts of data indicate that these sorts of things are on the rise. And they're also, we know that animal cruelty, animal violence is related to domestic abuse and domestic violence. It's all part of the same pattern. So it's in everybody's interest that we stop this, and getting the legislation is key, because if you don't word it properly, weasel words, we're back to loopholes again, and we need to make sure that this time we get it really, really tightened up and finished. I think that will be part of the looking at the Act. And
Yes, I mean, and to bore you with the details, some of those things would include, for example, extending the time that police have available to charge cases. So at the moment, you've only got 6 months between the time of the alleged offence taking place and charges being possible, which, especially in quite complex cases, is far too short, and we see cases falling down for that reason. And there's precedent for that kind of action, for example, in the Scottish legislation that's been recently strengthened. They've got sort of longer powers. And there's scope for looking at other sort of more detail of police enforcement. But again, fundamentally, we need to make sure that the tools that the police are given are clear and usable. There's no point in providing them with tools that, for example, Matt Longman, who is the national police lead on fox hunting crime, has described the Hunting Act as a leaky sieve, and doesn't provide them with the enforcement tools they need. So we need to give them clear, usable legislation.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, I rushed too quickly. There is a microphone coming around. Yes, go on.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Dylan. I work for Cruelty Free International. We campaign to end animal testing worldwide. I want to ask a question related to something that, Richard, you said a few times, this idea that we, as campaigners, present our message and our asks meet the context of the political moment. So this policy is free or cheap. So at Cruelty Free International, we are leaning more and more into the idea that, you know, there will be improved science and the effectiveness of our kind of protection of consumer safety if we use non-animal methods. I worry though sometimes working anymore. Oh, it is. I worry though sometimes that we're losing sight of the kind of fundamental reason why we do this, which is that these practices are cruel and that they should end because, you know, for the interests of the animals. Should we worry about that, or should we just be strategic and do what, you know, wins the argument? What's the balance?
That's a good point. Does anyone want to come in? I know I work on FIRB. It's a very important point. We always like to come back to the basics of animal cruelty because that's the successful argument that we make. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. Does anyone want to come in on this? It was kind of about campaigns. I'm interested on MP's perspective as well about how you feel things are.
I think you need to have both.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have just one, because the government is focused on what you know, the pounds and pence, if you like, of everything that you present is like, oh, you know, sharp intake of breath. It's not going to cost, you know, it's going to cost too much. Can't do that. But the fact that most of the animal welfare strategy or legislation could be enacted for very little money, but a great deal of political gain, that is very attractive to them. Now we have to get that message across to number 10, because as we've already said, it cuts not just DEFRA, it's Home Office, it's housing. We've got to get that message to number 10. So that's Josh and my job. We've got sometimes, not bypass, we never bypass ministers, we're always very polite to ministers, but sometimes we need a ruling from on high to say, right, let's get this done. Because if it's in our interest, political interest with a capital P, then, you know, government advisors are very interested in those things. So we have to phrase things in a way that will be attractive to them. It's a bit like when you go to a pitch for, I don't know, some sort of product. You've got to know your audience and be able to pitch it at that audience. You may slightly change your pitch to get to the next audience, but you will still get the ultimate result, which is your legislation will get done, and that's the important thing.
Does anyone else want to come in on that one? No?
I could make a short comment.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, obviously be mindful of the need to pitch your to the audience that you're presenting to. I think there is something to be said for, as campaigners, to also be trying to lead the agenda and help set the agenda where there are matters of importance for animal welfare, public health, etc., and not just follow sort of the winds of the current political agenda. And also, there's a need for persistence. I mean, some of these issues take a very long time to solve. And sometimes they might be in vogue and sometimes they might slightly fall out of political fashion. But for the sake of the animals, for the people who care about them, and then ultimately making change, we need to make sure that we don't sort of drop the ball, lose sight of that. We need to be persistent and, yes, craft the message as necessary, but we don't want to just sort of blow with the winds of political change and ultimately sort of not be effective as campaigners.
Yeah, I think one thing I always worry about is, like, in the animal welfare sector, campaigning, is that decision makers might just pat us on the head because we're the nice animal people, whereas actually it's a very serious issue. We want to make a difference, and it's urgent as well. So it's about the situation is getting ourselves heard. I think that's what we try to do, which hasn't always been easy since the election, but we've got a lot of good policies and a lot of work behind the scenes that it's been doing, so fingers crossed in the future. We've got time, I think, for one more question. Yeah, at the front here.
So at the moment, there's a lot of cases of animal abuse around the world. Two examples would be the destruction of orangutan habitats in Borneo and the culling of dogs in Turkey. Is there anything a Labour government can do from an internationalist level to address these issues? Thanks.
Good one. International leadership on animal welfare is something Labour's did last time he was in government on a number of issues. Does anyone want to come in? Ruth, do you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we work with countries across the world to ensure we are encouraging, you know, we don't have any ability in a direct sense to say, right, stop doing that. But what we can do is say things like, okay, we won't import your fur. We won't import other products which we know have been made through bad animal welfare. I think it's really important that we are seen to get alongside people, because a lot of the time these are countries that are maybe not as developed as us, they're scratching out a living. It's a question of education. There are other ways of doing things, and I think we need to be getting alongside people. But there are some things that we can do. I mean, in the Western world, when you go to see the dolphin shows, you look at the size of the tank and you think, hang on a minute. But everyone goes to Florida and we do the swimming with dolphins and whatever. We need to make sure that we make people think, our people, the UK citizen, when they go abroad, they think about, oh, hang on a minute, and what am I doing here? Am I encouraging this cruel industry of whatever? So I think there's education here, there's also education abroad.
Yeah, just to add, I think Ruth's absolutely right. Like, leading by example is really, really important. And also not making this seem like a sort of imperialistic, we're imposing our sort of views and values on you, because often you can actually have a backlash and you have the opposite effect. And we know we have that even in this country. People are very worried about the nanny state and being told what they can and can't eat, for example. And if we go down that road, we might actually find ourselves in a worse position than when we started off. And I think you have to kind of see where countries are coming from. As Ruth said, often people are trying to scratch out a living and maybe not going about things the way that we would want them to, because it's not financially viable for them. But I think we have to sort of try and raise all boats together and try and present opportunities rather than kind of threats and impositions on other countries, because that sort of winning hearts and minds is absolutely what you need to do when, as Ruth said, you don't have the sort of legislative power to force change. You've got to try and encourage it, and there are lots of different levers we can pull to do that. But as Tashi was saying, like, we've got to, when we're internationally dealing with other countries, we've got to keep animal welfare on the high on the agenda, because often it can slip down when we're talking about all sorts of other things like tariffs and economic growth. But we have to see that as part and parcel of all those other things we want to achieve.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, the time has absolutely flown by, so we're coming towards the end. Just one more thing, I'm going to pick on the panel now to come up with one issue if Parliament was that you could vote on to make a difference, one policy once Parliament returns. Very quickly, quick fire. Will?
I'll choose one that I haven't mentioned, which is ending the use of cages to breed game birds. So we're pumping out upwards of 60 million game birds out into the countryside annually. A lot of people don't know that they are largely factory farmed in battery cages. Our lovely friends at the Countryside Alliance estimate that 75% of pheasants that are released come from caged breeding.
A really good point. It's environmentally destructive as well, releasing so many birds like that.
Absolutely. And questions around vectors for bird flu. There are calls for an end to a moratorium on release.
And Laws had a report on this as well, actually.
Yes, in 2021. So, I mean, that you want to go away and read the 2021 report. It's exceedingly comprehensive, and it will show you the full range of impacts, both on sort of ecosystems, the environment, additional burdens of predation, which are then, of course, attempting to be solved by then further destruction of native predators rather than looking at the root cause of the issue.
Sorry to rush you, but Ruth, one issue very quickly.
One issue, ban fur and fur product imports.
Very good. Tashi?
One issue, I guess, if they want to give the biggest boost to animals in a generation, they can't do so without addressing farm animals. So some of the things that Josh has mentioned, ending cages and labelling.
Will sort of, took my one. I would have said set out to, to ban cages, but I think I'd add into that my hobby horse of labelling. It's a nettle we need to grasp, and the sooner we start to have those conversations and start to get legislation in place, the better.
Okay, we're coming to the end, but I'm going to just do a quick little focus group here. So we've got a short list of cages, animal welfare, labelling, and fur. Is that it? That was it. Yes. So if you could just put your hands up for which one you care about most. So if you say, if you want to make one choice on ending cages, you can only choose one. Raise your hands now. If you want to ban fur. And if you want to introduce mandatory animal welfare labelling. Okay, I think fur won that. No, we didn't. It's cages. Well, thank you very much. I think that's been a really useful, and I hope you all agree it's been an interesting panel discussion. And thank you so much to all of my panellists and to the staff at Sierra as well for making it possible. Thank you very much. There are leaflets and so on from Sierra and Laws over there in the corner of the room. There are fringe events later on. I believe Animals Matter have a drinks reception very shortly, 6 o'clock. Laws also have one tomorrow at 6 o'clock on our stand at E10, which will be hosted by Danielle. And then we have the Laws karaoke on Monday night at the Adelphi Hotel.
I make one addition to
the notorious
of fringes.
Go on quickly.
There's a wildlife crime fringe Tuesday at 10 a.m. at Revolution de Cuba. If you'd like to come along and hear about various ways of solving wildlife crime, we've got head of the National Wildlife Crime Unit speaking, along with the lovely Ruth Jones.
A lovely Ruth Jones.
I'll be there.
Yeah, and I thought I was trying to butter her up. But, so yeah, thank you. I'll just finish to sum up that hopefully this time next year we will be here, maybe in this tent again, holding a fringe, and we won't be talking about what can be done and promises that have been made, but we start to talk about what has been done. I know it's not going to take a duration of a parliament probably to do everything that has been promised, but I think this time next year we want to see a lot more progress, because if Labour don't make a difference for animals in government, then nobody will. So it's up to us, and we've got a lot of hard work to do, and we will do it. Hopefully you can help us and be with us along the way. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.